Welcome to Camp Podcast Piano Talk. I am pianist Eunmi Ko, and I serve as president of the Contemporary Art Music Project, or CAMP. CAMP is an organization that promotes innovative art music and collaborates with composers and performing artists. One of many activities we do is our podcast series. Our hosts explore a wide range of topics from marginalized composers in the music history to current collaborations. Piano Talk brings you new piano repertoires and composers who wrote them. Tonight, I am your host. I am delighted to have guest composer Jared Redmond. What you just heard in the beginning is Doth by composed by and performed by Jared Redmond. And it's great to have Jared right here. Hi Jared.
Hey, thanks so much for inviting me. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, you were speaking from Korea, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I'm at home here in Seoul.
Yeah. It's great. I don't think we had anyone at least in my show from Seoul.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, the wonders of modern technology.
Right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I think it's really great to have you here because I think you are kind of a rare case who does um, both composition and performance professionally. And there, of course, there are people like Robert Helps and Japsky that you know perform in public, but it's still rare, right? Right? It's not, you don't see it that often.
Yeah, I mean, there are some cases of a few big names these days who are known to be, capable
Hmm.
performers. I think, for example, of Thomas Adès, who,
Oh,
of
that's
course,
right.
is a
Right.
super major composer played by
Right.
everyone, and he's also, a concertizing pianist.
Right.
Although I think it's clear that he uh, is mostly first and foremost known as a composer. You know,
Hmm.
obviously, as you know, and probably most of your listeners know, um, in the history of Western art music, if you will, um, many of the major I mean, the vast majority of famous composers, at least since the Baroque era, were very capable pianists, keyboardists, to sometimes really like legendary keyboardists, with a few exceptions, right? Like Berlioz was a guitar player, I think, and so on. But in general, they tend to be very capable keyboard players. But again, as you and everyone knows, in the age of modern music, whatever you take that to be, most of the really innovative and kind of the kind of composers that you would study in a music history class, who really kind of did a lot of original and inventive and unique things. A lot of them were not, I'm talking about really after World War I, World War II especially.
Hmm.
A lot of them were not primarily, concert level
Hmm.
performers.
Hmm.
um, and from a certain standpoint, I think a lot of people could consider that a strength, because composers who are very, very attached to the keyboard often tend to think very much in terms of the keyboard when they write music. And so, if you're looking for that kind of music, of course, it's a good thing. But
Hmm.
if people are looking for a kind of music that's a bit, more, kind of from outer space, so to speak, something that's really innovative, that's not tied so clearly to music of the past, then um, a lot of times people consider it really a strong suit if a composer is kind of free from the habits of the keyboard. So in my case, it's been very complicated. I've had to go through many years of second guessing myself and trying to kind of soul search and figure out um, who I was, or who I am, or who I will be as a composer,
Hmm.
because for me the issue of being a pianist was always the first issue. Like, You know, as early as I can remember, when I seriously started to study composition academically, when I was an undergraduate, um, up until very, very recently, to be honest, I kind of
Mm.
really considered myself first and foremost a pianist rather than a
Mhm.
composer.
Mhm.
And it's just funny the way life turns out, because the job that mainly puts food on the table is that I work and teach in a composition department at a university, and so I'm employed as a
Mhm.
composer. I write music. I'm sometimes, if I'm lucky, I'm invited to present my work in places and to write for other
Mhm.
ensembles and so on. And then a lot of my activities as a pianist, in fact, the vast majority of my activities as a pianist until very recently, so let's say for the past, roughly 15 years of having some kind of professional career,
Mhm.
has really been as a pianist playing other people's music. So for me, it was always kind of divided neatly down the middle. Like when I was a pianist, I was being a pianist playing 99% other people's music and thinking really
Mhm.
as a pianist as if I never knew how to write a note of music. And then when I was working as a composer, it was sort of like another me. And so I think the piece that you just played this excerpt of, which is
Mhm.
called, as you said, Doth, which is quite new. It's only from 2019 or so. Um, that piece is really the first piece of a kind of mature, if I can call my compositional style now mature in some way. That's really the first piece where these two worlds intersect, and where I kind of, as I was writing the piece, I thought, let's finally not shy away from being
Mhm.
a hyphenated word composer pianist like a lot of the old
Mhm.
masters. Let's
Mhm.
let me kind of pursue my identity as a pianist, but also my identity as a composer in the same creative activity, and that's how that piece came to be.
Great. Yeah. Um, I mean, I always thought it's a beautiful piece, and it's, as you said, yes, there's, of course, we have this rich history of composer who also was uh, a professional pianist. Of course, there was Rachmaninoff and Chopin, and
Right,
yeah.
definitely.
So yes, I
And
mean,
you've
why not?
played the piece, and you've played the
I
piece
did.
yourself, so which I'm very happy you did. And so that even though the sound of the music is certainly in some ways very far from, let's say, Rachmaninoff. On the
Hmm.
other hand, I think, I don't say it's good or bad, or better or worse or anything, but certainly playing that piece, and I think with repeated listening to the piece, anybody can sense that that piece does have some kind of foot in the keyboard music of the past. It's not totally
Yes.
like, it's not like if you learn a piece by even a legendary kind of avant-garde composer like Xenakis,
Right.
who I
Right.
respect very much, where you get the feeling that in some sense the music wasn't written for humans. It's just completely coming from another world. And if you like
Right.
it, that and if you like it, then that's why you like it. Actually, that's its strong suit.
Right.
But as a pianist, who enjoys playing old music as well as new music, myself and yourself included, I think it's satisfying to be able to play, I hope, to be able to
Hmm.
play a piece like that, which it doesn't feel super nostalgic for music of the past. It's not written in a kind of post romantic style necessarily, but at the
Hmm.
same time, the piece feels that while it is wearing some kind of influence of modernism, post-war 20th century modernism on its sleeve, it also fits in the hand very well, and you get to explore all
Hmm.
the range of touch and expression and phrasing and pedaling that you do when you play Chopin and Rachmaninoff, even though the harmony is a bit more freaky.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that your kind of inspiration from Scriabin, and I still remember how you explain uh, how this composition came by from that, and you actually took some notes from Scriabin's work,
Yes.
and I know that Scriabin is one of your favorite composer. Um, So maybe we can listen to your playing of again. It's excerpts, but
Sure.
Scriabin, Opus 74, right?
Yeah, so this
And
is the final, the pianists listening will know this if they like,
mhm.
early 20th century music. Scriabin's Opus 74 was a set of 5 preludes. They were the last finished pieces that he wrote before he died rather young at the age of 42, 43. And there's 5 short preludes, and the ones that you're going to play, I think, are the first 3 of the set. They come from a
Yeah.
concert that I played
Yes.
back in, I think, 2017 or so.
Yeah. And maybe we can continue listening to Michael Finnissy's Scriabin in itself, which I heard in live when I was in Seoul, when you
Yes.
performed that piece.
Yeah, that's
So,
a piece that I
yeah.
also like very much. Yeah, definitely. We
Yeah.
can maybe talk about it after people take a listen.
Yes. Yeah. So let's listen to Scriabin Opus 74, number 1 to 3. These are excerpts, and Michael finishes Scriabin in itself, also excerpts. Okay, it was Scriabin Opus 74, number 1 through 3 excerpts. Michael Finnissy's Scriabin in itself, also excerpts.
Yes.
Yay.
Yeah, Scriabin, as you mentioned, Scriabin is a composer very, very close to my heart. In fact, when I did my doctoral studies, again as a composer, I studied at a school where they have this very old, and I quite liked it actually. They have this old school kind of very academic composition slash theory doctoral degree. And so it's one of the schools in the United States where if you do a doctorate in composition, they also want you to write a scholarly doctoral thesis project. And so
Mhm,
the subject of my doctoral thesis was precisely the music of Scriabin, which I'd loved since I was a student. I mean, a young student. I just got more into it and more into it as I got older. Michael Finnissy, as you know, because just about a week ago, a week and a half ago, I was visiting Florida, and you and I played two crazy concerts with really
right.
crazy contemporary repertoire. One of which was a piece for two pianos by the same composer, Michael Finnissy, which is called Wildflowers from the mid '70s. That's a really tough but really beautiful piece. Um, if some of your listeners don't know and they're interested in that, Michael Finnissy is a living, very respected composer with a long career behind him. He's an excellent pianist himself. I believe he worked as a repetiteur for modern dance for many years. So he's just an insane sight reader, and he's written literally hundreds of piano pieces. In fact, if I have to think about, I was talking about this with a colleague of mine recently, if I have to think about, again, this category of the kind of pianist composer, this old historical category,
Mhm,
I think in the modern day, as we mentioned, there are very few of these pianist composers in the kind of really kind of hardcore kind of world of avant, contemporary music that comes out of the avant-garde.
mhm,
In music that's more kind of friendly and easy to listen to, kind of
mhm,
lyric music, there are many, composer pianists out there, some of whom are very good. But in the realm of like really intense kind of like, innovative avant-garde contemporary music, I think Michael Finnissy is pretty much the only one, or at least the only one of
mhm.
that reputation. Maybe you could say that Rzewski was one until he, passed away recently.
Right.
But Finissy's music is, tremendously hard to play. If anybody's ever seen the scores, they're just notes everywhere, and um, but the more I get into it, and I've played now two big pieces of his, and uh, which leaves hundreds more if I ever want to study more in the future.
Mm,
Um, it's nice because you get the same or a similar sense of satisfaction playing a piece like that you do from playing, let's say, Transcendental Etudes by Liszt.
mm,
It's tremendously hard, but
mhm,
the more effort you put into it, the more colors and range of expression come out of the piano. And in some sense, it is written very, very well for the piano.
mhm,
This particular piece, Scriabin in itself, which is sort of recent, it's from the 2000s, um, is very representative of his kind of recent music, where he actually does use a lot of quotation. He uses transcription techniques. He has, for example, kind of crazy reimaginings of Gershwin and Verdi music for the piano.
mhm,
He does all this kind of stuff, transcribing folk songs. Some of it sounds like folk song, and some of it sounds just like complete chaos, but somehow the folk song is buried inside the music in some way. So I like this piece, Scriabin, in itself, because it shows Finissy at a bit more kind of meditational atmosphere. There's even a quotation of a Scriabin G sharp
mhm.
minor prelude that kind of fades out of the music and then fades back into it. And it's a really, really interesting piece, which I like a lot. I hope to play more in the future.
Yeah, I remember from the live performance that really I talked about this. It feels like it's kind of go in and out of dream,
Yeah,
right? It's like
exactly.
very um uh Yeah. Well, one thing that I found when I played with you and rehearsed, although we had such um, small amount of rehearsals in such short preparation time, but
Yeah.
it's really really free kind of playing that you have you take a lot of time and give a lot of time. There's this a lot of rubato in your playing also, how we both of us love this old generation of pianists, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and I mean, I always find how they start phrase and finish phrase, that's really really beautiful, and also same time that's very clear when you hear them playing. And I always thought, your playing is like that. It's, you can really understand the message, and also very free.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's the best compliment I could get.
Mhm.
I always joke. In fact, I joked with your students when I did this master class. If
Mhm.
you remember, I said the deader the better, you know,
Right.
and obviously that's not to say that there aren't tons of really awesome pianists playing nowadays. Of course there are, but it is true that to me, this is of course my opinion, that the generation in which we live now and increasingly so dominated by technology and dominated by a kind of fetish for technical perfection and repeatability and um, you know big warehouse manufacturing and all this kind of stuff,
Mhm.
sort of assembly line music and assembly line musical education. um, I'm very lucky. It's a very long story, but I'm very lucky that when I was young, I had a great mentor, a teacher who did not come from that world. And I also, in some sense, did not come from that world. And so I think I was able to come at music with a certain kind of old school um, approach to creativity and a certain kind of freedom, which is not so common anymore. I mean, most musicians nowadays, you know, think that they're very, very free, and to some degree they may be. But if you compare the freedom of the average pianist nowadays playing Chopin with the way that, let's say, Frédéric Lament played Chopin in
Mhm.
1910, it's not even comparable. I mean, it's not even comparable. And God knows how it would have been if we could have heard Chopin play. I mean, my guess is
Right.
that many people working now would have said, oh my God, this guy can't play, because the way that they
Right.
played back then, they were concerned with very, very different things than people are
Right.
concerned with now when they play piano, for example. Um, so yeah, if anybody hears in my playing something that harkens back to the old guard of let's say early 20th century or turn of the 20th century musicians who were not yet um, they were not yet constricted by the psychology of making recordings or this kind of thing, then I'm really happy.
Yeah. Well, speaking of older music and playing, romantic playing, um,
Yes.
we can listen to your performance excerpts of Schumann.
Yes,
This
let
is,
me tell you
yeah,
something about this piece. Do
yeah.
you know this piece actually? Many people
I
don't
don't
really know it.
actually. I don't know.
Right. So
Yeah.
this piece is called Gazenga Del Fria. You'll have to forgive my bad German pronunciation, but it means the songs of dawn. And the songs of dawn, the Gazenga del Fria, are um, it. People often say it's sort of like Schumann's second to last piano piece. Um, I, with no musicological justification for this opinion whatsoever, I actually kind of think it is just his last piano piece. So most people know that at the end of his life, he was suffering from syphilis and he had
Right.
terrible kind of mental issues. And so for the last 2 years of his life, he was in an institution and couldn't work. So this is one of the very final pieces he wrote before he entered
Mm.
institutional care,
Yeah.
basically. And he wrote them basically. They were given to Clara Schumann, and she said something funny in her diary. I don't remember exactly, but something like, "As usual, the music is very unique and very difficult to understand." And I think these are very. This is Schumann the philosopher. You know, this is very late Schumann. In some way, it kind of harkens back to old music. There's a lot of medieval sounding stuff, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of counterpoint, and in another sense, it's so colorfully, harmonically romantic and free that it almost sounds like a really late romantic, almost Mahlerian music.
Mm.
So this excerpt that you're going to play now is the fifth short piece of out of five pieces, because there are five pieces in the set. So this is the final piece which ends the set of Schumann's Gazenga der Frühe.
Okay, it was Schumann's Gesange del Fruhe. It's a my German is even worse than
Yeah, close
Gesange.
enough.
It's
The
in a
Songs of Dawn.
Songs of Dawn.
Yes.
Opus 133, number 5,
Yes.
performed here by Jared Redmond. It's yeah. Wow, I want to play it.
Oh,
It really is,
it's
right?
so beautiful. It's really,
Yeah.
really beautiful. The only piano piece that Schumann wrote after that is a piece which is called the Geist of Ariazzione, the Ghost Variations. And those are sometimes played as well, very a bit rarely, but they're played. And I like them, but again, with no musicological backing whatsoever. I always get the feeling that the Ghost Variations are sort of unfinished. Like if he had had more
Mm,
time to think about
mm,
it, if he had had a better state of mind at the time, maybe he would have added more or changed them more or something. So I don't really know if that's true, but to me they seem a bit green, whereas these Songs of Dawn feel to me just like a really I mean, some of
mm.
the best Schumann piano that he ever wrote. And as you know, he wrote a lot of good piano
A lot.
music.
Yes.
Like really
Yes.
a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, so I always ask this question to all my guests because I believe that our podcast series has this um, educational aspect to younger generation of pianists and composers and any musicians who listen to this show. So. Do you have any advice for pianists who are studying currently in the school and thinking of taking this path as a professional musician and performer?
It's a hard question to answer, but I'm reminded of when I was a younger pianist and I met the famous pianist Marc Andre Hamelin, and I always had admired the fact that he was very dedicated, still is very dedicated to playing lesser known, lesser played composers and pieces. Um, Very wide, diverse repertoire. And I asked him if he had any advice about playing, about career, whatever. And he was kind of like, honestly, I can't give any advice because I feel I kind of did everything wrong. I didn't really win a major competition, I whatever, and still somehow people want to listen to me play. So I kind of got lucky. I mean, he was very nice about it, but he really felt he couldn't give a lot of advice. And I think I'm a little bit the same. I don't know how to answer any career based questions per se, but I can speak to the musical aspect a little bit and give my opinion on that. So, musically speaking, if somebody's a pianist and they feel that they love piano and they have to play, one of the things I would say is be curious about the wonderfully broad, diverse, extremely deep, and extremely historically long tradition of European keyboard music, or traditional composed music in the European tradition, let's say. So not only what we call classical music, but keyboard music that comes from before, for example. I mean, all the wonderful, wonderful harpsichord and fortepiano music, some of which is played on the piano, like famous Bach pieces, some of which is almost never played on the piano, composers like Froberger and William Byrd and Couperin, who only very few pianists play. Um, some of that stuff is absolutely wonderful. In addition, from all the famous A-list canonical composers, Chopin and Beethoven and so on, most of them have tons of other interesting pieces which are almost never played. And it's refreshing to dive into them because it reminds us of the scope of their creativity. It gives us a kind of window into their time. And it just holistically, if I can use that word, kind of increases our love of and appreciation of and awareness of this wonderful tradition of music that we're taking part in. And of course, I would also say, most of the people nowadays that grow up playing classical music, I probably 99% of them, don't only listen only to classical music. Most of them are also listening to pop music or rock music or jazz or whatever they like in their spare time. And so we already have a diverse sense of aesthetics and a diverse sense of sound. And um, I do notice sometimes young musicians get a bit defensive and they're a bit, they don't know quite what to make of all this modern stuff that happened since the early 20th century. And um, one of the wonderful things about contemporary music, and part of the reason that I write it and that I play so much of it, is that we live in the most aesthetically diverse artistic time probably ever. And nowadays, if you feel that you don't like music that's incredibly wildly avant-garde, that's fine. There are thousands of very capable, nice composers working in styles that are more easy to listen to, and they reference music of the past and so on the other hand, if you're the kind of person who likes something which is a bit more off the wall and zany and kind of extreme or whatever, there's a long history of avant-garde music and experimental music and partially and totally improvised music that can be really exciting when it's done very well. And so um, I would just say, be curious, seek out all the wonderful gems of music that are hidden that most of our um, classes and most of our teachers, unless we're very lucky, never introduced to us, because piano has by far the hugest repertoire of any Western classical instrument, or the keyboard, we could say. So explore it and dig deep and see what you find. There's going to be thousands of pieces that you never even considered that are going to tug on your heartstrings and ignite your imagination and so on. And the second thing I would say musically is I would really encourage young pianists to get in touch with older performing styles. And I don't only mean taking note of historically informed performance, which is, of course, wonderful and really inspiring when it's done well. But I also mean listen to the way that pianists played before recordings and media kind of standardized in the early to mid 20th century, before they kind of standardized the way we think about playing Chopin, for example. If you go back and listen to recordings that were made in the beginning of the recording age, very early 20th century, all those pianists cut their teeth and trained in the romantic era and with a romantic kind of approach to playing. Now, when I was young, I heard a lot of talk. Probably still people talk the same today about not wanting to romanticize Bach, not wanting to romanticize Haydn. Well, there's something to be said for that, but playing expressively and playing with creativity and playing with freedom and playing with a certain sense of uniqueness, as long as you're not distorting the music too much, distorting what it looks like the composer had in mind to some extent when they wrote the piece. Um, that's basically at the heart of the whole tradition. When we go to see a great actor act Shakespeare, we don't want to see he or she act it the way that it's been acted 1,000 times before, or else it's not interesting. You can simply watch a recording, or you can rent a DVD, or, well, no one does that anymore, but um, and you can just enjoy whoever, Sir Laurence Olivier, and there's no need to watch anybody else. So the reason that we love the performing arts, the texted performing arts, like the theater, like classical music, is because these wonderful pieces that were made by incredibly talented, skilled individuals um, can lend themselves to just tons and tons and tons of new nuances and interpretations and so on. And so um, don't let yourself become dogmatic. Don't let yourself be straitjacketed by a famous performer, or perhaps by a little bit overly conservative teacher. Um, Everything has to be done in good taste, but you really have to find the way that you can sing through the piece, and the way that that piece resonates with you in a way that, pardon me, due to your own uniqueness as a person, it doesn't resonate with anybody else in that exact way. So I think if you reference and get acquainted with some of these performers of the past, first of all, you'll be surprised at how incredibly new they can make this music sound that you think you really know. If you really listen to Chopin's first ballade played by a series of pianists in the 1920s or something, you might be really surprised at how you never thought the piece could be played that way. And it might also surprise you how much you like it, perhaps even better than some of the most well known people that are playing today. So I think that will really help inject a lot of inspiration and life and a sense of freedom and possibility into all the hours we have to spend in the practice room to be a pianist.
Thank you so much. I think that was really helpful and insightful. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for playing some of my playing as well.
Of course, yeah. We can end this episode with your performance. It's also excerpts of March of Trolls by Edward Grieg. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your insight and thoughts about music and performance.
Thank you again. It's been my pleasure.
Support us by donating. You can go to our website, www.contemporaryartmusicproject.org, and simply click the donate button. Help us continue our podcast, festival, and other exciting projects. Thank you for listening. I will see you next time with more piano music.